Welcome to Education Matters, presented by the Public School Forum of North Carolina. I'm your host, Mary Ann Wolf. Nearly 2/3 of adults report experiencing at least one adverse childhood experience, or ACEs, which can have negative impacts, including health problems, mental health issues, and learning difficulties. Mental health supports for students are critical. Now more than ever, we as a state need to invest in our children and provide them with the services they need. To see what a trauma-informed school looks like and what they are doing to support students, we visited Tramway Elementary School in Sanford, North Carolina, in Lee County Schools to learn more. Our guest host who visited the school this week is Tom Williams, previous host of Ed Matters and the immediate past chair of the Public School Forum's Board of Directors.
It's a pleasure to get to introduce our first set of guests this afternoon. Andrea Cummings, the principal of Tramway Elementary School, and Dr. Johnnye Waller, a Lee County Schools assistant superintendent working in the area of auxiliary services and director of student services. Andrea, what does being a trauma-informed school mean to you, and why is this important to you?
I think you have to just realize that students spend the majority of their waking hours in our building, and so that's the main reason that we wanted to focus in on this area. The other thing about being trauma informed is that we want to make sure that we're responding to kids not just academically but at their developmental level, and that can mean a lot of things. Also, just defining what trauma is was hugely important. We all thought we had an idea of what that was, and the definition is quite different. So that information and that definition has really guided us in our focus in this area.
Johnnye, as a district leader, how do you see your role in creating this kind of trauma-informed climate and culture within your district?
As Andrea mentioned, the trauma, especially coming out of COVID, we see such an impact on all of our children. So I think looking at each school, their needs, working with them to define their needs and what resources we can put in place. So in working with Andrea and Tramway here, that was one of the needs that they identified as far as the impact of trauma on their students and their staff here. So looking for the resources to help them educate their staff in that area was a primary role that I served.
Andrea, what does implementation of trauma-informed or well-being and mental health well-being strategies look like in your school?
School-wide, we really did focus on the zones of regulation, and so we taught students how to identify what they were feeling and what zone that put them in. And we also identified of those zones when they could be their best selves. So that took a lot of background work with our resiliency team, and just getting that student-based language out to them and in our whole building. And so that started really this year with our students, and there were videos that we did during some of our morning meetings that helped them to identify their feelings and identify what zone they might be in, and that the fact that they were in the green zone, they could be their best self for their friends, for their teachers, and in learning. I think some of the biggest successes that we've seen are when kids can do that independently. So there have been a lot of guiding questions to get them to that independent moment where they can identify themselves, how they're feeling, what zone they're in, and whether they need to take a break or what behaviors would help them get back to that green zone where they could be their best learner. When you start to see that happen independently and organically without those guiding questions, we've even had parents comment that when they're at home, they can identify when their parent might be in the red zone and call them, out on that piece, and then help them figure out how they can then be their best selves. I think that's when some of those success stories have shown us how impactful this really is when it carries over into independent identification and then into the home.
And finally, where do you still see some of the greatest needs and challenges that you face?
I think a challenge is always time. I think you have to make sure that when you are getting buy-in from your staff, that they understand the why, and then when they do see some of those impacts, they understand why carving out that time to have this taught to all of their students is going to impact not just the learning in their classroom, but the well-being of the children throughout the school day. And it's a shared responsibility. It's not just the classroom teacher, it's not just our counselor's job, that it's everyone understanding the language and helping students work through their feelings and get on with their learning in their day when those are identified.
Johnnye, what's one piece of advice that you would give to a new school district that is beginning to start a trauma-informed journey?
My one piece of advice would be education. What is trauma? It's not just a one-time thing, and it's not just a mental health issue. The impact of trauma can be physical on the brain and therefore on learning and stomach, digestion. A lot of times the first thing that we hear when a child has experienced trauma is my stomach hurts, because the body is shutting down. Trauma can impact their health long term. So education on what trauma really is, some of the signs and symptoms or indicators of what trauma is, and then how do we help our children as well as our parents dealing with the trauma, because a parent may have one definition of the trauma and the child may have another. So in that partnership with the parents and with other agencies in the county or within the district to help it be a whole child approach. That would be my advice.
Andrea, as a principal, what recommendations do you have for state level policy leaders and decision makers of steps that need to be taken to support students and educators in creating a better environment for their students?
Well, I think you do have to start small, and you have to be incremental with any type of change like this. And education is a huge part of it, understanding what adverse childhood experiences look like, what they are. I think a lot of people do think that trauma is maybe a one-time event that's happened in a child's life, but that's not necessarily the case. The environment that they are in when they go home could be a trauma risk factor. If there's, divorce in the family, if there's substance abuse going on in the home, if there's separation from a parent, all those things can play into what a child brings to school. And so just, again, educating and making small steps to understand what trauma is and how we can support those students in school.
We all know that no two students are exactly the same and no two schools are exactly the same. How do you meet the individual needs of students in a trauma-informed environment?
I think relationships are the biggest piece of that. Knowing about students outside of their academics and making sure that you see if there is a change in their behavior from one part of the school year to the next. Also having a relationship with families and parents so that there is an open communication about what might be affecting, different behaviors at school or academic losses or gains. So I really think the relationship piece is critical in figuring out how you can reach each student individually.
It's very correct that each child reacts to trauma differently. It may be the same situation, but they may react differently. And a lot of that, I think, just like Andrea said, would also be how many protective factors did that child have in comparison to another child? And those protective factors can look different for each child. So we do have to look at it individually and to address that child's unique response to the traumatic event or events.
Great. How do you see a trauma-informed environment help students grow individually and academically as well as in their personal growth?
Well, we've seen many cases where students come off of the bus already in the red zone because something happened at home before they got on the bus, and they need an adult contact to help them get to a zone that would allow them to access their day. And so having all of our staff understand the zones, people on breakfast duty, our bus drivers, they can immediately intervene. And that has allowed some of our students to be able to start their day off more successfully than if we weren't able to help them identify how they're feeling and what we can do to help. We have folks on campus that will do check-in, check-out with some of our students that we know have a pattern of coming into the building, maybe not in the best headspace. So we can go ahead and proactively reach out to them, find them early in the morning and get them into a space where they could be in the green zone, which is where they know that they can learn best and start their day off that way. We have also given students some individual freedom to go up to a teacher and say, I'm not in my best zone right now. Can I take a 5-minute break? So proactively self-advocating for themselves. So because everyone in the building is very aware of these needs for various students, even staff, they know that we do allow for those breaks and those times to get kids reset and then back on the right track. And just kids knowing that this is a safe place where they can ask for those things for themselves, as much as we would want them to carry that out through their adolescent years and even as an adult, knowing that they can take a step back and then get themselves back on track and ready to move forward.
I think for many it is a change in culture, a change in shift. So we begin to look at not what's wrong with that child, but what happened to that child. Mm-hmm. And each school and staff, and it comes from the administrator, making sure they know their staff and are they ready to make this step and how to implement it in a small step by step. It is not a checklist process or here's the manual on how to do it. The administrator knows their staff, knows what will work with their staff, and knows the students and their family population. And then they work from there on beginning the whole process of becoming trauma-informed.
I do think it is knowing at what pace you can make those changes. And also, when you have that plan, you have to evaluate whether it's working or not. And then if it is, what do we need to continue doing that's working well, or what can we add? And then if it's not, what can we take away and replace with something more effective? So continually assessing, okay, these changes, these small changes that we've made, are they, helping to create a better environment for our students? It almost needed not to come from me. I mean, I felt like my role was to facilitate, help look at the plan, have the conversations, the reflections on whether it was working or not. But then the part of the resiliency team that were the teacher peers, the teacher leaders, really presented it to the staff in a way that they were hearing it from a peer and not from an administrator, and they were sharing the impacts that they were seeing in their classrooms and things that they were doing at morning meeting that helped to stimulate conversation. And when a child went to reset room to pull themselves back together, what behaviors they saw when they came back to the classroom. So they were hearing it from peers. And my job was just to remove barriers so that could happen.
Thank you again for being with us. And after the break, we'll continue our conversations with leaders from here at Tramway Elementary School in Sanford, North Carolina.
Education Matters is brought to you each week in part by Participate Learning, uniting our world through global learning.
Welcome back to Education Matters. We're coming from Tramway Elementary School in Lee County. We're delighted to have 3 guests with us for this next segment, beginning with Megan O'Shaughnessy, a school counselor here at Tramway, and she's joined by her colleagues Jessica Jackson, an intervention specialist and classroom teacher here, as well as Myra Cole, a 2nd grade teacher at Tramway. Welcome to each of you, and thank you for being with us today. What does being a trauma-informed school mean to you, and why is this important to you?
Being a trauma-informed educator to me means that I need to look at the whole child. Yes, my job is to come here and teach curriculum and standards, but as a trauma-informed educator, I need to be aware of things that are going on in the child's life. I've always seen the importance of creating relationships with my children, but through this training, it just emphasizes what good teachers have always done, is create those relationships, because when those relationships are built, then children are willing to share, and that learning will come about. But also we know that when behaviors come about as a trauma-informed educator, that I need to choose to look into the why. Like, what is causing those behaviors, that I can hopefully put some supports in place to help that child.
What does implementation of trauma-informed or well-being and mental health well-being strategies look like in your school?
I don't have enough words just to explain adequately how much it's meant to me to be a part of this. The things that I've learned, as Jess said, I think we've already, a lot of the things became natural because we've done those for years and years, but all of a sudden knowing that we have a way for them to group their feelings and talk about their feelings, and like with zones of regulation and the fact that how they're feeling this particular day or whatever, it's really been it's been a wonderful ride.
How do you see a trauma-informed environment help students grow individually and academically as well as in their personal growth?
I think in addition to some of the strategies that have already been talked about, we have a really fun mentor program we call Big Shark, Little Shark, because we're the Tiger Sharks. And that helps us match kids that might be needing a special person to look forward to seeing at school. And they're assigned to someone, and that is their person. And so if days are going well, they get to celebrate with that person. If they're needing extra support, that person can come in and give them extra support from someone that they know is there to benefit with them. We also, and Myra can share a little bit more to this, but we implemented a few years ago using morning meetings. And I think every year we've gotten stronger with that. Every classroom kind of implements that better. Some of them are more formally structured morning meeting. There's a lot of planning put into it, and it's got many great components to it. Some of the other classes, they do an academic spiral review to start their day off. And they've actually started adding in some questions about feelings or kind of reflecting on how things are going in their spiral review. So it's kind of shows that how we're feeling is just as important as how we are academically being successful in the classroom. We have also put some things in place for the staff because we recognize, especially during COVID time, it was a huge focus that we needed everybody to feel safe and welcome here at school, and that included the staff, because it filters down if the staff doesn't feel, with their mind totally focused here at school and enjoy being here, then, that's something that impacts everybody in the building. So we do a lot of staff stuff to kind of amp everybody up and get everybody excited about being a school family, because every classroom is kind of their own school family. So we might do bingo where the whole class can celebrate, and they've just done different things with that here at school. And then we also have implemented family night, where all of us get to bring our families, and we do kind of food truck stuff with bounce houses. And it's really kind of fun. The other night, the last one that we had really touched me. We had a staff kid basketball game that just kind of occurred. And you have these tall 10th graders out there with the first graders, right, just having so much fun, because sometimes it's tough to be a staff kid. So just all of us kind of getting to know each other and celebrate each other.
It's so funny how one of the complaints I've heard in years past is that teachers will say, but that's spending too much time on, like, say, morning meeting. I need to get to academics. But I have found that the time that I've spent developing those relationships with children during the morning meeting far surpasses anything, because they've learned they've learned to have respect. If we're in the morning meeting and somebody's talking, I can go, remember, so and so has the floor, we're giving them our respect. And they learn all these things so that when April or May's here, whenever you're doing math, they're all open ears and listening, respectful, because that's something you've established since day one throughout the morning meeting. So it really does, for me in my classroom, it's a consistent way to start every day. It's meaningful relationships, and then it builds that positive community and that positive respect between the teacher and the student. And then it's just a safe place to be. I've got one student that has some issues this year that just sort of sometimes will come in a little bit frazzled, and we always start off with what color are you? And he'll immediately say, I'm on red. And we talk about why. And he's really had a great year this year. And I think just being able to, he knows that I know what his feelings are and that he can express those. And because of that, it's a safe space that he feels like academically he's doing better also because of that. So there's a trade-off. You are spending more time perhaps in the morning, but the trade-off for what you gain academically.
What's one piece of advice that you would give to a new school district that is beginning to start a trauma-informed journey?
I think my advice to teachers would be that it is worth putting in every ounce of effort to create this environment and relationship with a child. To the principals and administration, it is worth allowing the teachers the time for the planning, the time for the implementing, the time away from maybe what we're saying is the academic core, to be able to take the time to create these relationships. And with the piece about the family atmosphere that we're trying to create here at Tramway and keep that going, is that it's important to take a moment to take time for your staff and to boost your staff, because all of these things, these relationships, whether it's child to child, adult to child, or adult to adult, those relationships are what create the place that we come in every day, and we want that to be a positive experience for everyone.
You know, the idea is to be trauma informed and making sure we're, keeping an eye on everybody and trying to recognize where our students are coming from. Anything, we've all talked about this before, anything that we do that would be helpful to a student that's struggling is also good for the whole population of students. And so all of the things we do as far as relationship building and giving everybody a place in our school family, you just see the growth and the relationship building and all of those skills that we want to see out of adults in our world. And that's what we want them to grow up to be, is people who are kind and can have interpersonal relationships in a fair and kind way, and then also succeed academically because they're comfortable here and they're taking it all in. Everything you guys are giving out, they're taking it in and they're learning from it. So it benefits everybody in the building being trauma informed.
We all know that no two students are exactly the same and no two schools are exactly the same. How do you meet the individual needs of students?
I'm actually thinking of 2 or 3 that, you just know in your heart that they're dealing with things at home or that they have no control over. Mm-hmm. And so anything you can do once they walk through that door to make them feel that they are respected and they are loved, and that you're setting like a high standard for them, because it's not just about loving them, but it's about them knowing that you expect so much of them that they want to rise to that higher level. And I love that with the big shark, little shark. The funny story is that one of ours that we had came to the room one day, and he found out that it was a student that I'd had in the past, found out that his younger brother was my little shark and I was big shark. And he came through the room, busted through, and he's like, but wait a minute, how did you get to be his mama's shark and I'm not? So Megan,
yes,
the good person that she is, and so insightful, so now I have both of them, both brothers.
Yes.
And because we can change it to be what it needs to be sometimes with that. So just little things like that, like the mentorship program. And I think just knowing that they're all somebody's child, they're all somebody's baby, they're all somebody's universe. And it's up to us to work in all those feelings, to figure it out so that we can tap into the best person they can be.
Thank you for taking time to think and learn about education. That's all for today, and we'll see you next week.